Myanmar's military has promised to respect the law and said it guarantees that police will not start attacking protesters. Thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators continue to turn out in defiance of a ban on public gatherings, calling for the release of detained de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Internet access has been blocked overnight, and a new telecommunications law is being prepared as coup leaders try to shut down the protests. Joining us now is Hunter Marston, a WSD Honda Fellow at Pacific Forum. Hunter, what do you make of the latest developments as protests continue and the internet is shut down?
Well, the protests have generally kept steam the last week and don't appear to be letting up at all. So that's encouraging in some ways. Given Myanmar's history, I am anxious personally that we might fear that a military crackdown could be imminent. The internet shutdowns so far have not really prevented protesters from organizing, which is a much more organic sort of in the streets everyday occasion. But it has prevented sort of the brief overnight updates that we could use across the world to know what's going on inside the country.
Going forward, how do you see events unfolding over the coming days?
Well, I think a lot of that depends on the strength of the protests that continue or fizzle. If the junta is able to find some fracture lines within the opposition by co-opting some of the dissidents or ethnic political parties that have contested the National League for Democracy's rule previously, as well as the response of the military. If the military decides that it can't tolerate this dissent in the streets and decides to crack down violently on the protesters, this could be over in a couple of days.
Can you see a return to democracy, or is the military too entrenched now?
Well, the military has been entrenched for decades. The military, even during the civilian administration for the last 10 years, had been really front and center with firm levers of political control over governance. At the same time, it's possible that these protests and an international coalition do convince the military to make some concessions and return to democracy. So I think a lot of this will come down to the commander-in-chief, Min Aung Hlaing's personal calculations. How stable is the regime he's put in place? We really don't know yet. And I think a lot of that will depend on the ability of the protesters to connect with the international community and convince the generals that time is on their side and not on that of the military.
Right. There have even been protests here in Tokyo pushing for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. What will happen to her next?
Right. Well, we've seen that the charges against Aung San Suu Kyi are clearly politically motivated. The charge for owning walkie-talkies, violation of the import-export law, it's not quite as serious as something like sedition or threatening the Constitution or political stability. But that said, she will face these charges and apparently go to court on Wednesday. So we'll see what happens to her. It could be that the military is laying the groundwork to disqualify her from ever participating in politics again, possibly outlawing the National League for Democracy. So it's uncertain that she has a political future unless the protesters and international community can convince the generals that they won't accept the junta's continued control of power without allowing Aung San Suu Kyi some negotiated or compromised role.
What should the international community be doing now?
Well, we've already seen a raft of announcements with targeted sanctions from Washington. There's a good chance that that will expand. The UN and some other multilateral regional groups like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations have also condemned the coup. So I think that the pressure is on the regime. What the international community should do in coming days and weeks is to identify areas for particular leverage over the military's business interests. So we've seen Singapore and Japan notably cut some business dealings with military affiliated businesses in Myanmar. If that keeps up, and if the international community can convince the generals that the economic stability in the country will impinge on their ability to hold power, then it could be that they gain leverage and are able to convince the generals to let the civilian government, or at least negotiate with the civilian government again.
And what's China's role in all of this at the moment? Give us the big picture.
Yeah, it's very hard to say what China wants here or what role it's had in any of these events. Obviously, Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in the country in January, just weeks before the coup. There's a lot of speculation whether or not Beijing knew about this ahead of time. I've seen no evidence to support that. I'm still open to that argument, perhaps, in theory. With the cyber law, yes, there are rumors of Chinese coming in to advise on the implementation of this law. The actual equipment involved in the surveillance in Myanmar, I'm not certain where all of it comes from. You know, we've seen these cell towers on police vans going around the city that collect data and can actually be used to triangulate and find specific individuals the regime is looking for. But I'm not certain if that technology comes from China specifically. It could be Russian or Israeli made as well.
All right, that's Hunter Marston, a WSD Honda Fellow at Pacific Forum.